so I suppose when I read Vultures, I kind of think about the way it talks about like Belsen and the concentration camp, and then kind of compares that with these birds, which are also sort of portrayed as being particularly evil.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, I agree. I do think, when I think of vultures, I think of their ability, what's quite surprising in this poem is their ability to sort of love each other in such a hostile, horrible environment. So perhaps that's quite interesting, similar to how the commandant's presented in his ability, or the fact that he's known as Daddy, an affectionate term, but then he's also got the fumes of human roast clinging to him.
I mean, I found that image particularly sort of horrifying, this idea of the human roast, like these people have been reduced to some sort of meat or flesh and not even human.
I think that links in quite well with tender as well, because the idea that when you cook a roast, you cook your meat until it's tender. So it talks about tender offspring, meaning his loving emotions for his family, but then it talks about the human roast, which is the evil side. So the poet's clearly showing how your love and evil can't be separated, that you've got the evil is always with the love. And I think this is quite an important conclusion to a poem, because I think it's probably one of the only poems where the message actually comes across quite clearly in the actual poem, when it says that it grants even an ogre a tiny glowworm tenderness. So even the most evil person in the world has got some elements of love in them, or else we should despair that in the very germ of that kindred love is lodged the perpetuity of evil. Should we be despairing that love always exists within evil, or should we be thankful that, should we be despairing that evil exists within love, or should we be thankful that love exists within evil? I think that's quite significant in this poem as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if he really answers that. I don't think it's clear which side he's on, really. I know it does end with the word evil, which definitely sort of sways us more to believe that perhaps he is in despair and that he's not hopeful.
But in a way, they leave it with the reader, don't they?
Yeah.
They leave it with us to decide, to make our minds up.
So is that,
provided the examples.
Is that what he's saying? Is kind of saying, well, it is, you know, you make your decision. It's how you live your life that, you know, you're ultimately accountable for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, in what were they like? You know, if somebody's being held to account for some evil crime that's been committed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you think about the context of Vultures as well, he's an African poet, and you know, it kind of reflects, you know, how in Africa you have, you know, these societies which have lots of positive strengths in them, and where you have families that love each other, but yet at the same time you have these very harsh sort of systems of government that really do kind of reduce people to literally the human roast that he talks about, or about this, you know, the corpse in a waterlogged trench. I mean, I think that's another interesting sort of war image that we have.
Yeah, because corpse will instantly make us think of a human body, wouldn't it? So therefore it's linking in with the idea of evil again, because it starts conjuring up images of what's caused the death of this person, etc.
I mean, I suppose a lot of people seem to struggle with Vultures, really. I think it's quite simple, really, and it's sort of comparison of, you know, these birds who don't have a choice and this man that does. But what do you think some of the reasons are for why it can be a bit difficult to get a handle on as a poem?
I think one of them initially is vocabulary, because the way it's written, I think some of the vocabulary, it's not always clear. It's not, in some parts he's really matter of fact in how he delivers sort of his message. So for example, where he says, sort of in this first stanza, to the left, yesterday they picked, and another example might be strange indeed, and then thus the commandant. So on the one hand he seems really matter of fact, as if he's willing to just accept this is the way it is, that there is on the one hand people and birds that are capable of evil, but then also there's love there. And then there are other parts where the poet seems to almost ramble really and sort of go off on a tangent.
I think it can be quite narrative-like as well. It tells the story of the vultures, but there's never a conclusion reached. It's up to you to look at the language, to pick out what he's saying about the vultures, and I think he just tells the story almost of what the vultures are doing.
And all you get is that sort of comment, strange indeed how love, and you're sort of thinking, well, what's the connection? Yes,
jumps rather, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then again, the same with the link to Belsen Camp, the idea that it is again almost telling a story, and you've got the obvious, well, this is his evil act, and the acts he's committing at work are the evil side, and then the love he's shown for his children as the loving side. But again, it's up to you to analyse the language to work out what he's saying through that. It's just a general story that you have to pick apart to work out the love.
So a little bit like Night of the Scorpion then, which just on one level is just telling a story, and everybody seems to think, well, it must be about something more, and I suppose Night of the Scorpion is about something more, but it is also about the fact that this is what I remember.
Yeah. And I think you have to kind of dig into it to get to know the poet's feelings. So, like we were saying before, where it ends, that last stanza is the one that gets closest to displaying the poet's feelings, but it does give two options. So I think even that stanza where it does specify two messages and two meanings doesn't fully tell us what the poet is thinking and what the poet is feeling. You have to read into the language and the structure to try and break that down further. I think the poet's feelings do come across through the language and structure, in particular structure, because I think the way it begins with, in the greyness and drizzle of one despondent dawn, you've got the alliteration there. So because it's a hard D sound, it's instantly creating a very unfriendly, a very dark atmosphere. And so we're introduced to the evil before we are the love, almost implying that the evil has taken over the love and is actually more important or more significant.
And there's quite a gloomy rhythm to that as well, isn't it? In the drizzle of one despondent dawn and stir. So they're quite,
And also the greyness, the use of colour is quite significant. It instantly creates a very dark mood. And then the fact that it closes as well and lodge the perpetuity of evil. So the opening and the closing of the poem are both about evil rather than love. So it's almost like the poet is saying that the evil is more significant, is bigger than any amount of love that exists in the world.
I agree. I think another interesting structural point as well is the sort of the defined line almost that there is between the two types of evil. You've got the obvious layout where you've got the stanza on the left, which is exploring the evilness that the vultures are capable of. But then on the other side of the page, you've then got the type of evil that surrounds the commandant, and linking it back to the poet's feelings. Does he understand this type of evilness that the vultures display more? Because if they are scavenged to live, and they're making the most out of the relationship that they have together in this charnel house, whereas the commandant, is he just following orders and does he have a choice? Could he maybe choose to not be the position of a commandant, which is such a high position within the Nazi regime? So is the poet kind of saying these are two types of evil, but actually he can understand the vultures side more than the commandants. Because it's part of the natural cycle. Vultures are doing similar to scavengers. The vultures are serving a purpose. They're cleaning up corpses, dead waste, and they also are still capable of loving one another in this horrible, dark, despondent atmosphere.
And I think it's interesting that they've put it sort of in two columns in the anthology. I don't know if it was originally supposed to be like that, but even so, you've still got this sort of ellipsis that links those two to really emphasise that kind of comparison, that there is some sort of link between the vultures and the commandant. I'm not sure you can escape that. And that's like many of the other poems, this idea of comparing. So you've got what were they like past and present, or past and future perhaps. I mean, Two Scavengers, obviously, with its link to the idea of the word scavengers and the beautiful people. What is necessary? What is acceptable? And that's all about those comparisons. And then you have An Island Man, the island, and then the situation in London, and nothing's changed again. Again, sort of anger almost, maybe at the way things should be and the way things really are.
My reaction to this poem is initially I was divided because it is left on such a vague note, and I do think the poet leaves it entirely up to us whether we decide whether we do despair because there's so much evil that takes over the love. But I actually still leave it with a sense of hope, really. I'm quite pleased that even in these both environments, where there is so much evil, that there is actually that glimmer of hope, and that's something that I always I can relate to my own life, that whenever you go through phases of life, whether it's when you're at school or you're trying to get a job, or as you get older and take on new phases, you always look for the positives to try and sort of push on and improve and strengthen your own character. So I think it's something that's absolutely relevant, even though it's an African poet who is speaking about atrocities that have taken place in his country. I think it's completely relevant to how we live in a modern society. And that always try and see the positives in things and show resilience, and you can push through and carry on achieving. So I definitely feel a sense of hope, really, despite that word evil that's placed at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that I respond to it in that way. I think it is, I don't know, I wonder if he does want us to feel hope particularly. I mean, he picks like this epitome of, you know, the worst of humanity, this commandant at Belton, leaves it on that word evil. You know, there's that cynicism in the word daddy. And I wonder if he really does want us to, you know, realise that actually, maybe if we don't realise that humanity is actually capable of these things, then they'll happen again.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
I think that the language is quite important in working out your personal response. It depends which language almost stands out to you in a way.
Yeah.
And for me, because you've got the dark mood to begin and then it ends on perpetuity of evil, I'm looking at words in between, like rebelliously, the idea that the evil they can't shake off the evil even when they walk away from that situation, and things like corpse and cold telescopic eyes, that unfeeling side is almost quite disturbing in a way, the way that people can be so cold, and it's words like that that stand out to me more than tender and affectionately. So to me it's almost as if the evil has overtaken the love, and I find that quite depressing.
Yeah, but I think it shows the stubbornness of the love, the stubborn nature of the love, really, the fact that it is surrounded by so much evil, and the positive word, sort of the positive descriptions in there are sort of there are a lot less of them than the negative ones, but I just think that shows the resilience of love, that it will always be there, and that it's refusing to sort of go away, that despite the most evil sort of person that you can think of, the commandant, which does sort of typify evil in our day, we always go back to the Nazi regime, but there's still love there, so I just think that shows the strength of it.
Or, I mean, I find that line really telling when talking about love. In the centre of the poem, it's talking about love, and how it can find itself anywhere, and yet he says her face turned to the wall, almost as if it's a sort of a denial, and you wonder whether
ignoring the evil.
Maybe that's his warning, that we shouldn't deny the existence of evil. We should challenge it, like he's saying. So maybe there is hope there.
Yeah.